has been around for almost 90 years now. That means hundreds, if not thousands of heroes, but not thousands of keepers, unfortunately. It's not that Marvel wants us to forget Rawhide Kid, they just want us to forget how they treated him in 2003. See, Rawhide Kid came out as gay. Love that, great representation. But Marvel writers got in a bit of trouble. Instead of writing the character as a really cool, all-American, Wild West gunslinger that happened to be gay, they turned him into a gay stereotype. LGBTQ+ fans were obviously not happy with the one-note portrayal, and to everyone else it made the character seem worse than he actually is, because Rawhide Kid is really cool. He was one of the most accomplished gunmen in the days of the American frontier. Even though he was an expert marksman, he also just preferred to take people out with a different set of guns, if you know what I mean, his arms. Marvel also messed up because they included Rawhide's reboot in the adults-only Max line, and Rawhide didn't really fit in. He was gay and therefore that means he's mature content. It just didn't sit well with people and still doesn't. Thankfully, he got another series in 2010 and that was received a bit better. James Jim Patrick Scully, or Skull the Slayer, hasn't appeared since like 2011. It seems like the character will appear and then disappear for a few years before popping up in a random place again. Though the last time we saw him, he had been returned to the Bermuda Triangle with Lee Forrester. His story is equal parts sad and wacky. He was convicted of the accidental death of his brother. His brother was higher than a kite and pulled a knife and things basically got messy. The plane that was transporting the now criminal Skull got caught in a space-time warp in the Bermuda Triangle and they crashed on a planet caught between different points of time. How does Marvel come up with this stuff? Anyway, an alien had left behind a power belt and that's how he gained his super abilities. The power belt can't be worn without damage to the wearer. Skull's health soon began to decline and his skin became see-through. You could see his skeleton that was glowing green. He embraced it though and started going as the Blazing Skull for a minute there. He's crossed paths and fought with Captain America, Hawkeye, and the X-Men. It was in that final battle with the X-Men that we saw him for the last time. He's alive, just we haven't seen him in a while, so I guess Marvel either forgot about him or they are putting their focus elsewhere for a little bit. Jin Genie was a hero that I don't know how it passed the development stage. Basically, Jin Genie would only access her powers when she was completely inebriated. She would have to pump herself full of alcohol and then she was able to create seismic waves. Marvel must have realized that this character was a bit of a disaster because she only lasted one issue, like showed up and then immediately died. Her limited Marvel run happened in X-Force issue 116. That entire issue was full of really weird heroes that only lasted that issue. I seriously wonder what was going on in Marvel's writing rooms for this one. La Nuit was a mutant and on the X-Force reality TV show with Jin Genie. His power was the ability to project a veil of dark energy. We don't actually see him use it though. His stats on his Marvel.com character profile indicate that he isn't the most powerful hero out there, but hey, he tried his best. Big Bertha is a controversial character. Her mutant ability is body transformation. That's not new, but the method that she uses to change her body is interesting. She can add hundreds of pounds to her body to make herself a more formidable foe, but then to get back to where she started from, she has to throw up the excess. Many people view this to be making fun of eating disorders. It's not hard to see why. While she is bulked up, her strength improves and her legs get stronger, allowing her to jump really high and really far. She was part of the Great Lakes team and provided the funding for it through her modeling career. The body Bertha usually exists in is a supermodel, but her hero body is the larger Big Bertha.
Now, Spider-Man has a lot of villains, and a lot of those villains have animal-based names and powers. A lot of these villains are super cool and intimidating. We have Rhino, Dr. Octopus, Vulture, Scorpion, etc, etc. But some of them are just a little bit ridiculous, and possibly the most ridiculous would have to be the Kangaroo. We have had two different kangaroos. The first was Frank Oliver. Frank was an Australian boxer, but not just that. He was an Australian boxer who naturally lived with and grew up among kangaroos. And it was all because he just really liked kangaroos. Now, while living among them, he developed a ridiculously impressive ability to jump, and that is what led him to a career of boxing, which makes no sense to me. When he went to the United States without a passport, he used his ability to jump to both escape custody and to embrace a life of crime, and this led to him fighting Spider-Man. Unfortunately for Oliver, he entered a room containing a dangerous amount of radiation, which actually reduced him to a pile of ash. But don't worry, he was replaced by interior decorator Brian Hibbs, who trained to get a similar jumping ability but also augmented this by donning the most embarrassingly bad kangaroo mech suit I have ever seen in my life. And I haven't seen a lot of kangaroo mech suits, so I don't know of any actually, now that I think about it. Now, I have spoken about the villain Lifeform before, and while I absolutely unironically love this character, I really don't think that Marvel will ever bring him back. But the fun thing is, they totally and very easily could. The son of a fanatical right-wing libertarian saw George trained by his father to prepare him for the world. Although he wanted to be an actor, George was convinced to become a scientist by his father, who also got George a job at Advanced Idea Mechanics, or AIM. But his father didn't know that this would inadvertently get George exposed to the pro-gamma virus. This virus mutated George into this grotesque monster, becoming known as the Lifeform. Now, Lifeform has superhuman strength, durability, a healing factor, and he can survive in water and the vacuum of space. He even caused Frank Castle the Punisher to run away from him because his weapons had literally no effect on him. Eventually, Frank Castle knocked him into a river with a rocket, but George came back anyways, now with two different personalities. One his normal peaceful self, and the other being the monster Lifeform. George now came into conflict with Daredevil, but this time he was more of a confused monster, and eventually, in an altercation with police, his heart began beating so fast that he just collapsed and then dissolved into a puddle. While he did eventually reform, he was put into battle against the Hulk by the alien Mercy, who also turned him back into an actual human man again. But this wouldn't last, as he remutated and attacked an entire hospital. S.H.I.E.L.D. contacted Mr. Fantastic, who was actually incapacitated at the time, so then the Silver Surfer took George to a dead planet destroyed by Galactus and just left him there, as he couldn't really bring himself to put an end to this guy, but he didn't want to bring him back into society. And that is the last we ever saw of Lifeform. Just out on the remnants of a dead planet, one part of him wanting to just go to the end of time, and the other half growing more and more hungry as he just sits there. Now, when it comes to Wolverine, his backstory seems to be a bottomless pit of never-ending inspiration for Marvel writers, but after a while that kind of started to get stale. To prove that point, we are going to talk about Romulus. Romulus was basically another mysterious evil mastermind behind the Weapon X project. He was the one to raise Daken as a ruthless assassin, and he gave Cyber his adamantium skin, and he had been secretly manipulating Logan his entire life. Basically, if you take Sabretooth, give him some salt and pepper hair tied up in a top knot with Wolverine-like adamantium claws, and you basically got yourself one Romulus. Romulus claimed that he, Wolverine, Sabretooth, and these other feral-like mutants were a species of human that were descended from wolves instead of apes. But then, that was apparently just a lie used to manipulate Wolverine even more. Logan eventually learned that Romulus's grand scheme was for Logan and Daken to fight to decide who would take Romulus's place at the top of the food chain. And I think it's safe to say that a large majority of readers really just didn't care at all, as his character had a lot to do with a part of Logan's life that we had already closed the books on back in the 90s. Now, our last pick for today even rebranded himself, and it couldn't save him from being a laughingstock. Paste Pot Pete, or Peter Petruski, patented a multi-polymer adhesive that actually led to him becoming very wealthy. But being a complete doofus, instead of actually following that success, Peter decided to instead try and be a supervillain, using his invention to successfully rob a bank. Now, following that, Pete decided to level up from robbing banks to stealing a Delta Cosmic missile from the military. And thanks to the Human Torch and the fact that his only thing is super glue, this was a humiliating failure. He quickly became a joke to the superhero community. He even rebranded himself to the Trapster, which is a much better name, but that is completely overshadowed by his time as Paste Pot Pete. The character himself can't even handle being called that anymore. Hearing the name actually causes him to go into a rage and is totally listed as one of his weaknesses on his wiki page. Despite his hilarious past, Trapster has been a recurring villain for years, although he is almost never taken seriously. So when Spider-Man villain The Spot showed up and announced his title, Spider-Man quite literally fell over in hysterics before getting his spider butt handed to him. But The Spot is actually a pretty cool name, especially when you compare it to our first villain of the day, Mr. Fish. Mr. Fish was originally a petty crook who was exposed to radiation while out on a job, and he then fell into the East River. He emerged from the nasty New York waters as a half-fish, half-man hybrid with pretty impressive superhuman strength. Mr. Fish may look absolutely hilarious with an even funnier name, but he managed to create his own branch of the crime family known as the Magia, and he even created a decent criminal following before Luke Cage stopped him. Despite being actually somewhat impressive though, he is just a touch bit too weird to really work as a lasting villain, and I mean, he calls himself Mr. Fish, so there's that. Moving on, Pulp Fiction villain Dr. Fu Manchu was a mad scientist and mystic created in 1913 by British novelist Sax Rohmer. The character was built on stereotypes with traits like slanted eyes, a gaunt face, silk clothing, and long fingers paired with a Halloween goatee and an insatiable desire to conquer Western society. He was made to be basically a boogeyman who epitomizes fears about Asian peoples. The character became so entrenched in society that when Marvel writer Steve Englehart and artist Jim Starlin wanted to create Shang-Chi in 1972, Marvel acquired the legal rights to Fu Manchu and made him Shang-Chi's evil father in the comic book series Master of Kung Fu in 1973. It's pretty similar to how Marvel's The Mandarin first appeared and leaned heavily into stereotypes as well. But Marvel has not had the rights to Fu Manchu since the final issue of Masters of Kung Fu in 1983, so since then, comic book writers have found roundabout solutions to Shang-Chi's father, like in Jean Luen Yang's ongoing series Shang-Chi, he is now his own entity named Shang-Tzu, but he's still kept a majority of the traits that Fu Manchu had. Then there was the Shang-Chi movie, which completely changed Shang-Tzu to be an incredibly compelling, deep, and powerful character who had none of the stereotypical traits possessed by Fu Manchu, and Marvel could finally breathe a sigh of relief, even if they can't really escape the fact that they pulled the racism. Now, there are only one or two characters that go by the name Belladonna in Marvel Comics. The one most people are familiar with is Belladonna Boudreaux, who is the ex-wife of the X-Men's Gambit and a member of the New Orleans Assassins Guild. But the Belladonna I'm talking about today was actually Narda Ravana, a European fashion designer. This lady Belladonna had a problem with Roderick Kingsley, who would go on to become the Spider-Man villain Hobgoblin. Now, Roderick was another famous fashion designer, only he was one that stole from other designers. Kingsley allegedly stole Ravana's designs and marketed them in the United States, stealing her success, and for that, I guess he had to pay. Swearing vengeance, Narda assumed the guise of Belladonna and put together a small group of henchmen. She used toxic gas that could dissolve Spider-Man's webs and take people's lives, and she even had her henchmen dress up as the villain the Prowler to distract Spider-Man, all for the end goal of wiping Kingsley off the face of the earth. Unfortunately though, Belladonna just didn't have the popularity needed to be a lasting villain. She got arrested in 1980 while Kingsley became the Hobgoblin, and he's been causing problems all the way up until 2020 and is bound to come back at some point as well. Armed with a hate ray, the Hatemonger set himself up as a notable rabble-rousing villain who enticed fear and bigotry among American citizens, specifically against visible minorities. He also caused political instability in South America, which made him an enemy of the CIA, and he gave extremely bigoted speeches in New York City, which brought him into the sights of the Fantastic Four. This all made him pretty problematic in his earlier appearances, especially given the fact that he dressed primarily in a big pointy hood evocative of a certain group of incredibly bigoted people who I don't think I can talk about on YouTube. Do you know who else I can't talk about on YouTube? A certain man with a tiny mustache from Germany company who is pretty prominent in world history, and he is exactly who Hatemonger is. Or I should say, Hatemonger is a clone of that man created by Arnim Zola. Despite that, Hatemonger has been a pretty lasting villain, having gone through multiple similar costumes, multiple different bodies, and he even eventually got recreated as a being of living psychoactive energy by the Red Skull using a cosmic cube. But at the same time, he seems to be a rather obscure and little known villain, and I think that may be partially by design. Next up, the Spider-Man villain known as Mindworm is honestly just a really sad story. William Turner, no, not like the guy from Pirates of the Caribbean, accidentally took his mother's life using his unconscious vampiric psionic feeding abilities. This act caused his father to go into emotional shock and run it in front of a car. So, as you can imagine, this was extremely upsetting for William, as he did actually deeply care for both of his parents, and he didn't even know that he was a mutant when the incident occurred. Now, William isn't even a normal Marvel mutant. His mutation was a result of an experimental compound being stored near the hospital where he was born, which resulted in his massive head, which was the butt of a lot of jokes and bullying. William grew up in an orphanage before eventually moving into a shack in New York City, where he would feed off the emotions of the nearby tenants without actually taking their lives. One of these tenants was Peter Parker, and the two ended up fighting each other. Now, although Mindworm reformed, he was exploited by other criminals, and after being released from prison for another time, he became homeless and refused to use his abilities to defend himself for fear of hurting people, so eventually, before Peter Parker could help him, William's life was taken by a street gang, and he hasn't been seen since. Now listen, some villains are just a sign of the times. Asbestos is incredibly heat and fire resistant, and back in the day, we really used to take advantage of the mineral. It was in thousands of products, and it even came into our comic books with the super villain known as Asbestos Lady, who was fittingly a villain for the original Human Torch, the android Jim Hammond. Victoria Murdoch created herself a costume made entirely of asbestos, which basically made her immune to fire when she wore it. Now, since it is no longer back in the day, we now know that asbestos is actually incredibly carcinogenic. Not only does it cause mesothelioma, but it can also cause a lung disease called asbestosis. Of course, neither the writers of the comics nor the villain herself actually knew that at the time, but that didn't save Victoria, as she eventually did pass away at the age of 45 thanks to idiopathic mesothelioma. Kind of surprisingly, Marvel created Asbestos Man after the fact, a guy known as Orson Karloff, who had no connection to Asbestos Lady other than also wearing an armored suit of asbestos, and he actually survived his cancer but continued wearing the armor, just this time he dragged around an air canister to keep him alive as he did so. He was unwilling to fight anyone, and everyone was afraid to even go near him, which led to an hours-long standoff with the Great Lake Avengers before eventually just surrendering and then apparently dying at a later date, probably from asbestos.
Number 6. Black Widow and Bruce Banner's relationship. Remember in Age of Ultron when Black Widow was the key to calming down Bruce Banner? They were in love, right? I think. I mean, they were flirting at the beginning, and then even Steve Rogers was like, hey, you're not breaking any bylaws. Have at it. And then at Clint's secret family farmhouse, they're talking about running away together. And then after all this time in Age of Ultron, Bruce returns to Earth. He says hi to Nat in Infinity War, and then she says hi back. And that's kind of it. Well, according to the Infinity War co-screenwriter Stephen McFeely, he said they certainly wanted to do more. There was a clear romance that was left behind. In an interview with IndieWire, the director said, we have scenes, we wrote them, we shot them, of them sort of hashing it out. You've been gone, I've moved on, that kind of stuff, blah, blah, blah. It became very clear that if a scene was not on the A-plot, it would not survive Infinity War. That thing has to be on rails just to get to the finish line. I mean, sure, that's fair, that's totally fair, but I feel like if it wasn't going anywhere to begin with, it didn't have to be there. Besides, we have Betty Ross in the MCU as well. She still exists. The pesky Incredible Hulk plot coming back to haunt us years later. Number 5, the leader. Another huge villain teased in the MCU, but you may have forgotten about this one. Samuel Stearns, played by Tim Blake Nelson, was teased to become the villain at the end of that Incredible Hulk film. He got his hands on some of Bruce Gamma radiated blood, and when it was injected, his head started to become bigger. So what was this all about? Where was this going? Why was his head growing and looking weird? So Sam made his first debut in Tales to Astonish issue 62. He was working one night at a chemical research plant, and when he was moving canisters of waste material, one of the containers broke open and covered him in gamma radiation. He went from being smart to becoming a super genius. His brain could absorb more and more information. It got to a point where his physical body, of course, started to mutate. So now he has this giant green brain head. And he started to refer to himself as the leader, using his intellect to become a criminal mastermind. He clashed with Banner numerous times in comics. In fact, he actually ruined Betty and Bruce's wedding at one point. The Red Leader also joined the Thunderbolts in Volume 2, Issue 6. So maybe he'll return when those guys finally come together on the big screen. I mean, it looks like it's happening right now with Zemo and Ross at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So maybe he's coming back. But as of right now, who knows? Number 4, Cap's love life. Since the first Captain America film, Steve has been head over heels for Peggy Carter. They talk about finding a dance partner, the pacing is done really well, there's a genuine romance building between the two. So when Steve puts the plane down in the water later on in that film and sacrifices his life, the last thing he thinks about is Peggy. It's super nice, it's thoughtful. And then comes Civil War, we have Steve just making out with her niece, Sharon Carter, in the airport. It didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, she was in the Winter Soldier sequel, but still, it's a bit weird for me. But what makes this PDA in the airport more forgettable is the fact that Sharon is basically a villain now as of the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We see in Falcon and the Winter Soldier after the snap, she was just abandoned. She was part of a deal that if she helped take down the Flag Smashers, then her dark days as a crime boss would just be pardoned during that dark snapping time. Then a post-credit scene in Falcon and the Winter Soldier shows us this pardon, and then immediately she makes a call trying to line up buyers for secret government tech. Cap sure knows how to pick them. Damn. Number 4, Adam Warlock. In one of the many after-credit scenes in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, we get a hint at Adam Warlock being introduced into the MCU. He's a perfect sovereign created by Aisha to likely be used against the Guardians of the Galaxy in their next adventure. Now in the comics, Adam was created by the Enclave, a group of scientists who just wanted to create the perfect being. Makes sense why Zac Efron was rumored to play that part, okay? He's even referred to as just that in the short after-credit clip. More powerful, more beautiful, and more than capable of destroying the Guardians of the Galaxy. Now in Thor the Dark World, Eric Selvig wrote the Vault on a chalkboard among his notes on the Convergence. And in the comics, the Vault was a tear in space that was sealed by Adam Warlock. So the after credit scene in Thor the Dark World also gave us a much closer look at Adam initially. So in the after credit scene, Thor and Lady Sif visit the Collector to hand over the Reality Stone. And then in a glass case, we see a cocoon that looks just like Adam Warlock's cocoon. Guardians of the Galaxy director James Gunn admitted years later that he made a mistake putting that in, because at the time, he just wanted to put fun stuff in the Collector's Museum. He didn't know how serious people were gonna take the Easter eggs. Oh, buddy. You have no idea. Number 2, the Gauntlets. In Infinity War, Eitri is forced to make the gauntlet for Thanos on Nidavellir, the same place that Thor gets Stormbreaker and makes it just in time to join the battle in Wakanda, which would be on a list of best MCU moments for sure. But we did see an Infinity Gauntlet before this movie, a couple times actually. In the first Thor film, it was seen in Odin's vault. Now, come Thor Ragnarok, they fixed this with a simple shot. Hela walked by and said, "Fake," as she tipped it over. Cool. All the fans were like, okay, we understand that one, we're cool, we're on board. But a post-credit scene in Avengers Age of Ultron really got fans excited, and for no reason at all, it seems. The after-credit scene shows Thanos putting on a gauntlet saying he'll do it himself. Now, it's actually a really crazy after-credit scene. I remember the theater went kind of nuts. Infinity War screenwriters insisted that this is just a practice gauntlet, which is fair. I mean, you need practice to get that weight down. Because how embarrassing would it be if he goes to snap and it was like, damn it. Sorry, it's a new gauntlet. I've had like 2. And finally, number 1, the Bifrost Bridge. The climax of the first Thor movie was Thor making the ultimate decision to destroy the Bifrost Bridge. It's a huge moment. This means he won't see the love of his life again, and he saved Jotunheim from Loki, which is great. That's the main goal here. Now, when Thor returns on Earth in the Avengers, it's explained that this happens because Odin used dark energy. And at the end of Avengers, they used the Space Stone in order to go back. So far, this is making sense. But in Thor the Dark World, that bridge is just fixed. It's back to normal, and we didn't really get an explanation. Or did we? In a tie-in comic, Thor the Dark World Prelude, written by Craig Kyle and Christopher Yost, it shows just exactly how they fixed it. This comic showed Thor using the Tesseract to let the fires of Bifrost burn once more. And voila, Thor the Dark World now makes sense again. Although we didn't see it on screen, we do have a slight explanation, so we'll take it. Number 10, Thor's eye. Taika Waititi arguably saved Thor. He gave the character a complete makeover. He made an extremely fun sequel, and the stakes were still extremely high. There's some major MCU moments in this film. Hela breaking Thor's hammer with her hand, Thor getting a haircut, Asgard is now gone, Odin also gone. It's a lot. Now, near the end of the film, Hela takes Thor's eye out as well. It's a huge moment for him because while he's getting his ass handed to him by his evil sister, he has these visions with his father Odin, and they bond in these visions. Thor explodes, he saves the day with a handle on his new lightning ability, and the last shot of the movie is Thor sitting on the throne with his eye patch. And he looks just like Odin. It's a beautiful look. And then come Infinity War, he slaps in a new eye, and the iconic eye patch was just gone that fast. Now, in the Art of Avengers Endgame book, there's concept art of Thor still with the eye patch. So they were close, but maybe it was better for Thor's redemption to be entirely his own come Endgame. I like the eye patch, honestly. It gives me like Kurt Russell, Captain Ron vibes. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, those likes add up and it really does help us working from home and in studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now let's get right back to this list of weird MCU moments. Number 9, Edward Norton. Now, of course, we have to mention recast, especially when it's this big. Whenever people talk about rewatching the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you know, to refresh yourself before the next movie or the next show, there's always the question, do we skip the Hulk? I mean, chronologically, it fits in right after Iron Man 1, and William Hurt plays the same character. He plays General Ross, and he's still playing General Ross in the current MCU. But now the Hulk is completely different. Marvel decided not to bring back Edward Norton, not because of money, like some other people that I'm not even gonna mention on this list, but because they needed an actor who embodies the creativity and collaborative spirit of the other talented cast members. So Edward Norton's team did respond, saying it was indeed about money, but this isn't the first time Edward Norton's been on the naughty list. Number 8, Spider-Man Homecoming. One of my favorite Spider-Man movies of all time is Spider-Man Homecoming. It's pretty close to Spider-Man 2, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 2. They're both so different, but they're both so good. Now, when Spider-Man Homecoming takes place, well, that's a bit confusing. See, there's a flashback to the events of 2012's Avengers at the beginning of Spider-Man Homecoming, and then it says 8 years later, and boom, the movie starts. So that means Homecoming takes place in 2020. Although the film also tells us that Homecoming takes place a few months after Civil War, which happened in 2016. So in an interview with Infinity War co-director Joe Russo, when asked about the time gap between Avengers and Homecoming, he said it was 8 years, I believe. A very incorrect 8 years. And I thought the timelines in Endgame were confusing. God, my brain already hurts. Number 7, The Mandarin. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton and screenplay written by David Callahan. It stars Simu Liu, who you recognize from CBC's Kim Convenience, as Marvel's first Asian superhero. Now, everything in that first trailer looks amazing. The fight choreography, so good. And the villain is set to be the Mandarin. The actual Mandarin this time around. The Mandarin made his first appearance in Tales of Suspense issue 50. He wields 10 magical rings, each controlling a unique force. Now, the 10 rings aren't just physical items as well. No, it's the name of the evil organization that was working alongside Obadiah Stane back in Iron Man 1. They were the ones who actually held Stark captive in that cave. You could actually see their logo in the background, and you briefly see it again in Ant-Man as well, in the form of a neck tattoo. So they're still in the MCU, it's still a thing. So while we're super excited about the real Mandarin villain coming to life, we sadly have to reflect on the waste that was Ben Kingsley in Iron Man 3, when he played the Mandarin, well, the fake Mandarin. Marvel and their fake characters, oh boy. He was in fact not the supervillain Mandarin, rather his name was Trevor, and he liked crushing beers and watching sports.
Sports and comics. Unstoppable force meets an immovable object. Do they go together? Sometimes, and sometimes not. Today's sometimes not is NFL Super Pro. The series premiered in the 90s and lasted about 12 issues plus one bonus Super Bowl special. The starring hero was Phil Grayfield. He was a football player, of course, who got injured saving a small child because he's a hero, but it ended his career on the football field. Soon, he stepped onto the hero playing field though. His job was sports reporting. While interviewing a scientist that had created an an invulnerable football uniform. Two thugs break in and steal everything but that. In the scuffle, some chemicals get on Phil and now he has powers, just like that. Turns out the series author helped write the story so he could get tickets to a Jets game. That's objectively hilarious. Literally, Fabian Nazia said, "I was handed the concept and character, including his basic origin. I don't know if that was all the NFL's creative work or a combination of Marvel editorial and the NFL. I didn't ask, I just wanted Jets tickets." He's got his priorities straight, can't fault him there. If someone told me I would get free Eras Tour tickets if I wrote a Taylor Swift comic, it would be done in an hour. The Sleeze Brothers kicked off in 1989 and then dropped off shortly after. The series is only 6 issues and is a spin-off from a one-off comic strip created for Doctor Who, Follow That TARDIS. It's designed for adults and it follows a pair of brothers who grew up as orphans, but not on the Earth we know. Their Earth is far in the future and looks kind of like if you combine steampunk and 80s neon aesthetics and use that to build a city. It's full of everything weird and bad, very corrupt, and generally unwelcoming. The brothers exist here as private investigators. They are good at what they do, getting the right results, even if they don't always use the most morally sound methods. The brothers were seen in the totally stonking, surprisingly educational, and utterly mind-blowing comic relief comic of 1991, and then in the backup story in Image Comics' Elephant Men issue 16 in 2009, and they haven't been seen since. Probably because the comic and characters weren't received well and the first issue really didn't sell well. Many said the series didn't have captivating enough stories and bad jokes. Now Marvel seems to have left them in the past. Marville, that's M-A-R-V-I-L-L-E, was created in 2002, and I think Marvel has regretted it ever since. It was part of the You Decide campaign, a public contest or publicity stunt, however you want to define it, that put 3 Marvel comics against each other: Captain Marvel, Ultimate Adventures, and of course Marville. Marville was not received well at all. Maybe the worst reception on this list. It's a satire about the Marvel and DC comic scene, but the writing just not very strong. It was so bad that it's the reason many people believe You Decide was a publicity stunt to sell more Captain Marvel comics. The comic follows Kal AOL, who gets sent back in time by his parents to save him from the meteor strike of 5002. Only the world didn't actually get destroyed, so his parents send the time machine to him to bring him back. The 18-year-old hero instead chooses to go to the dawn of time to meet God. 18-year-old activities. The art style changes for that single issue where he meets God, maybe to represent that they are actually meeting God, I don't know. In issue 5 in this universe, Wolverine is one of the first humans. There are a lot of choices that get made for this series. The last issue wasn't even a comic story, it was a submission guideline book so writers could submit their work to be published under Epic Comics. It also contained tips for writing a good comic. I cannot imagine writing one of the worst comics in the Marvel lineup and then ending that run with tips on how to write. Delulu is the Salulu. Marvel and I have something in common: we both want to forget about this. Hawk Owl and Woody were also part of the oddity that was You Decide. They were characters in Ultimate Adventures. They were also Batman and Robin, so clearly a parody of Batman and Robin. But with a catastrophe like Marville taking most of the You Decide spotlight, the pair almost were forgotten, as Marvel probably hoped, until I grabbed them by the scruff of their neck and dragged them back for this video. The characters weren't fan favorites, and the series itself just never ran on time. The You Decide comics were supposed to come out over a 6-month period, but Ultimate Adventures took over a year. Was it as bad as Marville? Depends on the reader. I will admit, kind of funny to me at least, Woody rigging the lights in his orphanage to respond to clappers, but only his claps? That's funny, and also extremely impressive. Arabian Night. This guy has gone under a more intense microscope in the past few years. Anyone who knows this guy probably is like, I've been waiting for this one. For anyone who may be confused, representation, it's great. We love to see it. Arabian Night is a powerful Muslim hero. But when that representation comes as a caricature of a culture or is done in a way that makes people of the culture feel like you're making fun of them, that's frowned upon for a good reason. It's not very nice. So Marvel did reboot this guy with a less stereotypical image and are probably hoping we all just leave the other one in the faraway depths of our minds. Editor Andy Schmidt agrees with this take. He is quoted saying, "The first version of Arabian Night was just a visual stereotype that had no real character behind him. The original had a special magic carpet that would only respond to his mental commands, and his weapon was a scimitar. In the new version, the magic carpet got unraveled and made into a suit for Arabian Night that still gives him all the same powers the carpet had had, and he's now just super cool. One of the many Spider-Women, Mattie Franklin, seems to get put in and then immediately taken out. She is niece to Peter Parker's boss, J. Jonah Jameson. She got her powers through a weird ritual called the Gathering of Five, and then when Spider-Man disappeared for a few months, she was in the game. Then out of it soon after because she went missing, then came back, but then during Grim Hunt she was sacrificed, but then in Dead No More she came back as a clone, but then literally crumbled to dust. If I had a nickel for every time I watched a Spider Kid crumble to dust, I would have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice. Some fans didn't like the character just as she was. Others were upset that she got her powers through magic instead of science. Wait till they hear about what happened with the other dimension magic spider and Peter then. Some fans just thought a third Spider-Woman wasn't needed when she first appeared in the 90s. Now it seems like she has also found herself in the movie Madam Web, and I think we all know how that movie did, so we'll see how long this version of Mattie lasts. Now, I'm not sure if Marvel doesn't want us to remember this hero, or if they just forgot about her. Lorna the Jungle Queen hasn't been seen since the final issue in her 1950s series. There were only 26 issues in total, and I've read some of them. They come with some racially insensitive depictions of cultures that were common for the time, so that probably has played a role in why Lorna hasn't been brought back. The last issue ends with her and the animals of the jungle capturing 2 attempted poachers and keeping the preserve an animal sanctuary. We got a comment on a previous video mentioning Lorna that she should be incorporated into the main timeline again by having her appear in Wakanda. I think that's a great idea. They can fix some of the racial insensitivity from the first run and put her in. Lorna's character grew up in the African jungle with her father after her mother died during childbirth. As she grew, Lorna learned survival skills, but when her father passed due to a lion attack, she trained to become a skilled huntress and fighter. She rarely, if ever, used a gun as they had the possibility of jamming and failing, so instead she became a skilled wielder of various blades and spears. Marvel did publish an atlas for Lorna in 2010, so she is on their radar. With Black Panther 3 confirmed but no release date, I think Marvel could do it. I think they could bring in a new and improved Miss Lorna to life. Ulysses Archer hasn't been seen since 2011, and Marvel seems to want to leave that guy in the past. He was created for the 1980 series US1 based on the Tyco toy slot car racing toy line. He appeared as an applicant for Luke Cage and Jessica Jones's daughter's nanny, but he wasn't really in it. It was more like a cameo single panel thing. A few months later, in 2011's Annihilators Volume 1, he appeared again, but only as a supporting character. It feels like Marvel was trying to gauge whether or not fans remembered and wanted to see the guy again. He didn't pick up steam, unfortunately. Now Marvel seems to sweep him under the rug. His power set was a metal skull that could pick up on radio transmissions, and that's pretty much it. He's kind of strong, but he's college educated, good at driving, but the radio transmitter thing is his special skill, which seems less cool in the year 2024, but would have been way cooler in the 1980s. His series was also just wacky. It's only 12 issues long, and yet packed in a fight with a German Zeppelin captain, motorcycle gang, and aliens. The main problem people have had with the comic is the plot seems so unbelievable, a hard feat to accomplish when it comes to superheroes, but I guess an intergalactic trucker would do the trick. Maybe Ulysses will be seen again, but it seems Marvel is overusing his character for anything other than a cameo. Everybody knows the phrase, the luck of the Irish. Marvel capitalized on it and created the hero Shamrock. She is Irish and had the luck of the Irish, bought a pub later in life called the Luck of the Irish, wore green and had red hair. Just like every Irish stereotype rolled into one woman. In recent years, her character has been revamped a little to make everyone forget she started out as a literal walking stereotype. Shamrock's power was mystically mutated physiology. When she was a kid, she was raised by a militant Irish fanatic father. At the age of 3, her dad took her and her brother to the North Ireland mountains, asking the heavens to grant the sun powers to defeat enemies. But he brought his daughter along too, and something got messed up in the power transfer, and lo and behold, Shamrock came to be. She is a vessel for the innocents that died during war, and those innocents are the cause of her power. If Shamrock finds herself in trouble, the souls protect their host, and a soul will manifest itself as energy that makes her her lucky. It seems like she was given a predetermined amount of souls though. Her luck had unfortunately either disappeared or wasn't great enough and she broke her foot. She paid her bills by becoming a coveted hairdresser later on. Steelgrip Starky's run, like many on this list, was a little racially insensitive and a little weird, which is probably why he is never seen after his 6-issue run and no one talks about him until now. The full title for the series is Steelgrip Starky and the All-Purpose Power Tool. It was published in 1986. Mr. Starky is not a superhero. He has no powers, but he is a hero. He was designed to be powerless to show that the honest working man was equally as much of a hero as Spider-Man or the Hulk. Well, if that working man had access to a magical tool that once touched by one specific person, it would turn into whatever machine you happen to need to save the day. The sentiment is kind of, we may have amazing machines, but the person working it is just as important. The comic itself, while a neat idea, doesn't hold its own when you put it next to the legs of the X-Men and the Avengers. The storylines are a bit out there. One of them is about somebody putting bombs on the moon, and it's not really explained why they do that. Sure, as Marvel fans, we're used to our fair share of wild, never explained plot points, but I'm drawing my line here. Sorry. Changeling is known for a few things, but you might maybe remember him either pretending to be Professor X or Elvis. Yeah, the Changeling's mutant ability is shapeshifting, but specifically the metamorph strain, as he is limited to humans. He had basic telepathy, but that was then boosted by Professor X. He used to just be able to influence people. Now he can read minds and make you think his thoughts. Professor X boosted him, and he pretended to be Professor X because the real Professor X needed to go prepare to fight an alien invasion. But Professor X couldn't just disappear, so enter a Changeling. He did die as Professor X and was buried as Professor X. It was when he was brought back as a zombie that we got the Elvis moment. Zombie Changeling was helping out She-Hulk by providing a distraction, and that distraction was Elvis. He then went 6 feet under again shortly after. Changeling was revamped with a new name in some other universes. He became Morph, and he got a lot more character development and, sorry, but more interesting plot lines that he got to be himself in. It seems Marvel wants the Changeling version to be left behind and Morph to get picked up instead. Coming in all the way from Hollywood is El Guapo. He was a mutant stuntman. He worked on X-Statix, the movie, which is also the name of the real-life comic series. El Guapo appeared in X-Statix 9 and then perished in issue 18. Here for a good time, not a long time. Marvel might want us to forget this mutant because the guy didn't, really have powers. Instead, he had a symbiotic relationship with, take a guess, not a symbiote. Good guess though, he's attached to a skateboard. A flying skateboard. It moves at his mental command, and sometimes it even fights him. When El Guapo cheated on his girlfriend, the board beat him up, and was later his cause of death. He was impaled on his skateboard. It's all a little ridiculous, so it's not much of a surprise that Marvel has left El Guapo alone after his death. I feel bad for calling the mutant Ugly John, so I'm going to refer to him by the name he introduced himself as, Steve. Steve is a mutant with 3 faces, that's all. No powers, just serving face. Since he doesn't really do anything, it's understandable that he hasn't been revived since his tragic death in New X-Men 115. His first appearance was New X-Men 114. He wasn't around for a good time or a long time. Poor Steve. The last early mutant standing without the help of resurrection is Gabriel Shepherd. His character is pretty interesting. He's a proto-mutant, an early version of mutants whose X gene was less evolved. There weren't many of these guys to start out with, and Gabriel was the last one standing as he looked the most human and was the most powerful. The other proto-mutants had been getting revived to be used as weapons, and Gabriel found out by reading the mind of an X-Men, and he was not happy. He dispersed himself into pure energy, unhappy. This guy is super powerful. He was thought to maybe even be an Omega level mutant. He is immortal. He has super strength and hearing, has telepathic abilities, and can stop you from using telepathic abilities on him. He can fly, he can manipulate matter to make it something else, healing powers, like a power plant, he can generate electricity and even stop time. That is so many things. Why isn't he a bigger deal? I raise you. Does Marvel want us to forget him, or is the omnipotent Omega level mutant using his power to make us forget him? When you look at it, the poor guy just seems to want to live his life out of the spotlight. He's been around for hundreds of years. He had to have known about the X-Men, yet he chose to stay hidden. He doesn't really want to use his powers. Maybe we should forget about him, just to let the poor guy rest. I did a video on the history of Magneto recently, and in that we briefly touched on the Magneto clone Joseph. He really had us all convinced he was the real Magneto for a minute there. In his defense, he was a clone of Magneto and he had amnesia, so he did his best. Joseph just is Magneto. Everything Magneto can do, he can do too. He also does his best at causing problems. He's died a few times, but then again, so have most Marvel characters. The first time he was resurrected, he framed Magneto for eliminating a bunch of people. He tried to bring Magneto back to his reign of terror. He's resurrected again after dying again. He keeps impersonating Magneto. It seems that Marvel only remembers and wants us to remember Joseph when they want to bring Magneto back without bringing Magneto back. Remember, Magneto died, actually this time, but then Magneto was spotted. Oops, sorry, that was Joseph again. Joseph was also already dead, but it's easier to just bring him back apparently. Irina Clayton hasn't been seen since her single panel appearance in Legion of X9. She was only there for a second though. Don't get me wrong, she slayed, speaking literally and figuratively. She got a total redesign, so if they hadn't explicitly said it was her, honestly, I wouldn't have been sure. She's a lot scarier now, but that's just because of a monster spell, so hopefully it's not permanent. Her mutant ability is extra mouths on her neck. The extra mouths let her project her voice so it sounds like she is everywhere. I want to know if she can sing in 4-part harmony, because if so, she should have gone into show business. Maybe that's what she was doing, because honestly, Irina doesn't do that much. Like, for the most part, she's just a student at the school that appears in the background. She did help confuse some people who were trying to break into the school, but her appearance in Legion of X is the first time she actually gets her hands dirty, that we get to see at least. This panel also confirms that she does sing. Wouldn't it be wild if she was gone because she was a backup singer for Dazzler's World Tour or something? Anyway, Marvel really must want Qui-Gon because they made a new one. Seriously, the mutant known as Scream changed her name to Choir, quite recently too. I guess Irina is really being put on vocal rest. I scream, you scream, we all scream for ice cream. That's a fun phrase, so why not make a character out of it? Does it sound like a weird idea? Yeah, that's probably why Marvel wants us to leave Ice Cream behind. Ice Cream's mutant ability is turning himself into any ice cream, even a banana split. If you leave him in extreme heat or cold too long, he's gonna either stay melted, unable to solidify again, or will freeze totally solid and can't move. He was in Obnoxo the Clown in 1983 and literally was not seen until 2023. In X-Men Before the Fall, Mutant First Strike, he is giving out ice cream at a celebration. He just gives out ice cream, he doesn't do anything else. It seems like he's a character Marvel brings in for fun, but not for us to remember long term. Evan Daniels, better known as Spike, was created for the animated show X-Men Evolution, and that's pretty much the only place he is. There was a version of him brought into the comics, but that guy was loosely based on Evan. There were backstory similarities, but that was pretty much it. Spike's powers have to do with his bones. He can create bone spikes anywhere on his body and then throw them at things. He later created bone armor that was self-repairing and could use his spikes to climb walls and stuff. His weakness is loss of calcium. Regrowing your bones all the time and throwing them around means his calcium levels are low, so he drinks a lot of milk. Poster child forgot milk campaign. I know that his weakness is that he has to replenish with milk, but I think that can also serve as mental warfare. If I was in the middle of a fight with someone and instead of water they stopped and took a swig of milk, I'm off my game. That would haunt me forever. Every time he throws his bones, we don't see a wound, so he probably has some sort of healing factor. The character has good bones, figuratively and literally, so why isn't he appearing in the mainstream comic universe? Well, his power set is quite similar to the pre-existing character Marrow, so that unfortunately might have something to do with it. The last time he was seen was 2003 in the finale of the show. Robin Vega appeared in Spider-Man 82 and 83 in 1997, and that's all. Literally nothing since then. She is a mutant, but maybe since she wasn't in the actual X-Men comics, Marvel has pushed her away. Her mutant ability is metal mimicry. She can make herself metal. It's living metal, so she can move and stretch her body body parts around and even make her limbs weapons. She can melt herself down into a liquid or stay solid, it's up to her. And because she's metal, she's bulletproof. The powers are super cool, which is why Marvel has used very similar ideas with other characters. They're not exactly the same but different. Other metal mutants include Colossus, Mercury, and Flex. So the market is pretty saturated. The Spider-Man 83 comic ended with her literally just running off. Well, there are a few people out there who still remember her. It looks like Marvel might be sweeping her under the rug. She hasn't even been featured in more recent comics as one of those cameos of forgotten characters. Combo Man has shown up twice. Once semi-seriously, and the other was poking fun at the character. Combo Man was created because of a promotional agreement, which means he's really weird. The agreement was between Marvel, of course, and Eagle Snacks. He is a combo of a bunch of different Marvel heroes, and that means he has all their powers too. Combo Man is the hero. The human inside of him is Rick Wilder. Rick was a kid and he turns into Combo Man when he was near a lab explosion. Rick happened at the time to be carrying a Marvel comic book and Eagle Company snack brand Combo Snacks. Of course, these two things combined with Rick, and he is now Combo Man. If you want to check it out, Combo Man has one issue. It's just called Combo Man. His only other appearance was in Ziggy Pig Silly Seal comic at a Comic-Con in a back alley alongside a bunch of other weird forgotten Marvel characters. I count Combo Man as a mutant because quite a few mutants were part of the lineup that created him, like Cyclops and Magneto.
Number 6. Nick Fury's eye. Nick Fury has been there from the beginning of the MCU. Since that first Iron Man after credit scene, fans have been happy to see him reappear, even if it's just for a quick chat at a donut shop. His look is memorable too. I mean, for one, he's Samuel L. Jackson, so you're not really gonna forget him. And two, it's the eye patch. It's his character. He's so unique. Seeing him without one in Captain Marvel was almost weird. Fortunately, we got to see the origin to the eye patch, which was being teased since Captain America and the Winter Soldier. In that film, he said, "Last time I trusted somebody, I lost an eye." So, come Captain Marvel, it's time for some answers. Here we go. His eye then was scratched out from Goose, our furry alien friend. Yeah, it left a scratch that eventually blinded him. Yet in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, there's a photo showing of Fury being sworn in as S.H.I.E.L.D. director, with both eyes looking quite normal. Number 5. Doctor Strange. One of the best parts of the MCU is how much they like to tease their upcoming stuff. It gets you excited. I mean, the after credit scenes are so common now that if you leave during the credits on opening night, you're just gonna have like 200 people yelling at you through their Iron Man masks. They're gonna be hucking popcorn at you. You're gonna be the laughingstock. Now, some of these nods can be a little confusing though, considering the timeline when you look at it in the grand scheme of things. Like in Captain America, the Winter Soldier, again, Jasper Sitwell explains Project Insight and how it keeps an eye on these powerful individuals, like these threats. He mentions Bruce Banner, the Hulk, and Stephen Strange. It's a cool moment that tells us that Doctor Strange is indeed in the MCU. It's fun. I remember the theaters, there was a little buzz going around as soon as he said it. It's cool. But right before Strange even gets into that car accident that makes him become the powerful Doctor Strange, he gets a call about Rhodey when he fell during the airport battle in Civil War. Now, it's not confirmed, but it sure does sound a lot like Rhodey and his conditions. Listing Strange was a cool shout out, but I don't think Zola's algorithm knew enough about him to be considered a threat. Yet. Number 4, nanotechnology. Tony Stark's tech has gotten so much better over these years. I mean, even the suitcase suit back in Iron Man 2, like my jaw dropped the first time I saw it. I was like, how is this possible? This is insane. And then come Iron Man 3, Tony's suit is absolute trash. It gets him in all this trouble. It's a prototype suit, and that's the one that he chooses to wear after threatening the Mandarin. Weird flex, but okay, sure, we'll go with it. Also, Iron Man 3 wasn't a bad movie at all. It was fine. Doesn't make sense in the timeline really, but it's fine, it's fine. But come Infinity War, all Tony needs to suit up now is his arc reactor. It just houses nanotechs that form around his body. It's awesome. So he goes from wearing a jumpsuit to being fully protected in a split second. How neat. But a shot in Infinity War could mean that his jacket is made of nanotech as well. Either that or it's a continuity mistake. Either that or it's a filming error. Tony's jacket goes from resting comfortably over his shoulders to, well, who knows? Maybe Happy took it in that weird deleted scene where he rolls up in a golf cart. I'm glad they didn't keep that one. That was weird. Number 3, Cap's shield. Peter Parker is quite brilliant. So when he calls out Cap's shield and says that it doesn't obey the laws of physics at all, the kid's probably onto something. In the first Captain America, Peggy describes the properties of the vibranium shield. It's completely vibration absorbent. This is proven when Peggy then shoots at the shield numerous times and the bullets just fall to the ground, while the shield remains intact. Lovely, what a lovely piece of weaponry. And then in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, the shield reflects the bullets back at the enemies. Both great scenes, but confusing logic for the shield. But perhaps one of the most confusing moments is in Avengers Endgame, where Thanos has just ripped Cap's shield to pieces with his sword. It was a big, oh my god moment, because we were told up until this point that the shield was basically unbreakable. This made us really look at Thanos and get afraid. We're like, oh, he just ripped apart his shield. Cap's for sure gonna die, he's done. But then once the Avengers reunite in a quick overhead shot, we can see Cap's shield in the background, and it looks to be in much better shape than moments earlier. This act was probably a nightmare to film and edit, so we're gonna forgive them when it comes to this shot. But Strange still having the Eye of Agamotto, that one we could talk about a little bit. Number 2, Pym Particles. The time heist is a treat for MCU fans. We get to revisit fun moments in past films, even movies that fans didn't like that much, like Thor: The Dark World. We still got to go back and have some fun with that as well. Tony sees his dad and he has a heart-to-heart. Cap fights Cap and says Hail Hydra. It's awesome. The fans went nuts. It was a great time. Each member is given a Pym particle for said heist. They make it known that this is a factor, that they're low on Pym particles. The reason Cap and Tony have to go back even further during the heist is to get more particles. Yet before they do so, in the Avengers Tower, Scott is shrunken down. Right when Hydra comes in to take the staff, he's already small. That's when he talks about Cap's butt. They make it clear that Scott accidentally used one of these trips in the lab prior to the heist. So when Steve and Tony go back, Steve grabs extras, which explains the final battle. But how is Ant-Man able to shrink at the start of the New York heist when they were so low on Pym particles? Number 1, more Pym particles. And we're back to more Pym particles because a lot of these things don't make sense sometimes. In the first Ant-Man film, we hear numerous times the science behind the Pym particles. Because if you're gonna watch these amazing fight scenes, you have to at least understand the science behind them. So it's told to audiences twice that Pym particles shrink the space between atoms and not the atoms themselves. The weight doesn't change. So when Ant-Man is standing on Tony's shoulder complimenting Steve on his American glutes, he's probably the same weight. One of the most confusing Pym particle problems that we faced was actually in the first Ant-Man film, when it's revealed that Hank Pym's keyring is actually a functional tank. Old Tank Pym. So either Michael Douglas is just jacked and he's got these super strong hips, or the Pym particles and the weight, they just change it when they need to for the plot. Because these movies are far-fetched and it's fine, and we'll forgive these mistakes because most of the time these movies are just a load of fun. Number 10, Gamora's origins. Gamora is a character whose past is a little confusing in the MCU, and now with her sort of back with the Guardians of the Galaxy post-Endgame, I'm pretty sure it's about to get a little more weird. In the first Guardians movie, Gamora explains her childhood. It's brutal. She says that when Thanos took over her homeworld, he actually killed her parents in front of her, and then he tortured her and then turned her into a weapon. Even John C. Reilly, the Nova Corpsman, was like, yeah, Gamora is the last of her species. But come Infinity War, the flashback is much different than we thought. We see her childhood and we see her get taken by Thanos, but half the population survived, because by the time we get to Infinity War, that's his clear motive, wiping out half the planet's life. Now the children born then have known nothing but full bellies and clear skies. Apparently, it's a paradise. So her origins are still a little confusing. Does she have anyone left? So are they alive and hanging out by the beach sipping cocktails, or is she really the only last of them? Who knows? Number 9, Tony and Pepper split. One of my favorite MCU films is Civil War. It felt dark. The Avengers were facing all these consequences after hucking cars around. It was a huge arc for Steve and Tony, especially right off the bat when Tony's giving a speech to some students, and then all of a sudden the Pepper Potts line comes up and Tony freezes. He wraps up the speech and he walks off stage, almost shell-shocked. So at this point it's official. Tony and Pepper are no longer together. Tony walks off stage all distracted because he carried some weight from Ultron into this movie. It made it felt very real. He didn't stop making suits because he didn't want to stop. Pepper's like, well, you chose, peace. And then Spider-Man Homecoming comes rolling around and Pepper Potts comes from out of nowhere, all lovey-dovey, and they're back together. They're waiting for Spider-Man to announce his new Avengers status. It's like a big moment. It's almost like they haven't even been split up. In fact, it seems that they're better than ever because Tony pulls out a ring and just casually proposes to Pepper. What if Spider-Man did decide that he wanted to come out as an Avenger that day? When would Tony have proposed instead? Can we see that scene? Sounds pretty lovely. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be awesome. It really does help us out a lot, especially while we're working from home. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's get right back into this MCU list. Number 8, 2 Ant-Mans. The final act of Avengers Endgame is an absolute roller coaster of emotions. Once Hulk snaps the world back, all of our heroes reunite. Cap says Avengers assemble, and it's just a great time after that. Right off the bat, we get a super long one take bouncing from one character to another, an Avengers tradition at this point. And while these fight scenes are quite the spectacle, it's sometimes hard to keep track of where everybody is. And this goes for the people making the movies as well, it seems. Especially Ant-Man. Even when he's giant, he's still hard to track down. At the 2-hour and 23 mark, Black Panther is running with the gauntlet through the battlefield, and in the background, we see Giant Man pushing a Chitauri Leviathan back through a portal. Pretty awesome. Only a minute earlier though, we just saw Scott Lang in normal size, hotwiring the quantum tunnel van, a process that would have taken him 10 minutes to do so, says Scott. There's been a theory that maybe it was Lewis and he came back and then took a suit and then got giant and helped out, but I think that's just fans trying to cover up Marvel's blunder here. It's a massive scene. I mean, I didn't notice it the first few times I watched it, so hey, keep it up, you're fooling us. Number 7, Capitol Hill. A lot of people give Iron Man 2 a hard time, and while sure it's not the best superhero sequel, it had its moments, it had fun moments. A great moment when it comes to character development for Tony was when he was called to testify before the United States Senate Armed Services Committee. So Senator Stern demanded that Stark handed over his armor tech for military use. Tony then responds in a powerful way. He says that his suit and him are the same concept, and to give it over would be to turn himself over, which is not gonna happen. He is Iron Man. Plus, this is the same scene where we're introduced to Don Cheadle as the new Rhodey. It's a pretty big Marvel moment that takes place on Capitol Hill, except Capital is spelt incorrectly. I mean, hey, the YouTubers were probably too excited to upload the footage, and spelling mistakes happen all the time, even in a $200 million movie. Mistakes still happen.
The Thunderer lasted really long for not doing anything. He just recently died in 2019, kind of. His death was confirmed in 2019, but he actually died in the late 1940s. His entire hero thing was a microphone in his suit. That's it! He did set the microphone up with a speaker system designed to be so loud it was deafening, like thunder. He also has a lightning gun that can blind his enemies. You know what? Even if his hero design is just a speaker, his reason for becoming a hero was very noble. He was frustrated that America wasn't doing enough to fight crime and Yahtzee with an N activities that he decided that he, a regular scientist, was going to take matters into his own hands. He later also appeared as the Black Avenger in his last Golden Age appearance. Overall, having your superpower be a really loud speaker isn't quite as interesting as a lot of other heroes, so it's understandable why he's faded into the background. If you thought we were done with X-Force, think again. You Go Girl is gone. She teleports. She has to sleep after teleporting. The further she goes, the more sleep that she needs. She first discovered her teleportation abilities through sleep. She would keep waking up in random places because she really wanted out of her hometown. Her mutant ability manifested trying to get her out. Eventually, she did make it out to Hollywood and joined the X-Force. She was one of the most popular heroes on the reality TV show. I do love her hero name. She would also be my favorite if I watched the reality show. Overall, her character kind of paled in comparison to other heroes in the Marvel universe. The teleportation is really cool, but she has limits where other heroes just don't. She also appeared and disappeared pretty quick. She was only around for about a year. She was introduced in X-Force issue 116 and died in issue 128. As she lay dying, she requested to be buried among the stars, and that's really cute, so she did get a nice send-off. The other more recent time she's shown up was in 2022's Excellent, but it was just her ghost. Alex Clooney, or Zeitgeist, has a pretty gross power, so it's no surprise that he is not one Marvel would want anyone to remember fondly. The guy has acidic vomit. Like, he can burn through thick metals like steel in no time. He wears a mask thing made out of an unknown material that helps manage his power set. Because the first time he used his powers was a disaster. Axel was on a date with this girl, and as they were about to kiss, he threw up on her face. Even just a regular person doing that is a 0 out of 10, but he's a negative 10 out of 10 because remember, he throws up acid. The poor girl's face was burned, and that's where the date ended. But it haunted Axel for years. He was dating You Go Girl for a minute there, but then kind of died, but didn't die. He actually went into a coma from the wound that really should have killed him. He woke up and chose violence. He kidnapped his ex's daughter. His entire history is just full of weird thing after weird thing, and once again, his mutant ability is acidic vomit. What is happening? I'm with Marvel. Let's just forget about it. Pennies are useless now, at least in Canada. What do you even do with them anymore. Well, J. Pennington Pennypacker is putting them to good use by using them to fight crime. He throws money at his problems, and he actually appeared in the comic run for Somebody in Part 1, NFL Super Pro. Pennypacker's powers are shown one time and then he never returns. He can shoot pennies out of his hands. With a name like Pennington Pennypacker, he had to have seen that coming. Honestly, this is just the right amount of camp and I kind of love it. Pennypacker got his powers from a self-esteem camp that was actually a front for a scientist that was experimenting and giving people superpowers. Even though Pennington's name was already perfect for his hero persona, he took on the official hero name of Almighty Dollar. Almighty Dollar wasn't the only hero created that day. His college friends also gained powers and became the Girth, the Streak, and the Calculator. Altogether, the four men create the forgettable yet funny team known as the Happy Campers. Y'all, when I first saw this guy, I was shocked, surprised, flabbergasted. Whitewash Jones is his name. I wish I was kidding. Marvel, what were you thinking? Like, seriously, this is so awful. I can't even believe it. It was so bad. Marvel retconned the earlier versions of him to not be like the real guy and instead be a made-up character for propaganda purposes that was like a victim of racism. The character came as part of the group Bucky Barnes got called the Young Allies. The character was a very racially insensitive depiction and wasn't well put together at all. It's no wonder that Marvel made the major retcon and totally redesigned the character for his real-life debut as Washington Wash Jones in 2009, and he was treated with a lot more respect there.